Welcome to another episode of Philly Prime Podcast and Mob Talk Sit Down. Joining me is my partner in crime, George Anastasia, author, professor, book writer, Inquirer reporter. He's done it all. George, welcome to the show again.
Thank you. Good to be here, Dave.
George, let's get right to this. A shocker last week from the FBI and Philadelphia homicide detectives. Out of nowhere comes the arrest and charging of Richard Leidy in the murder of Gino Marconi in April of 1999. There's Lighty right there. George, your initial reaction to this when you heard this last week?
Well, one, 26 years later, what has changed and why are they bringing this now? I mean, that was my initial reaction. And then, you start to look at the history of this thing, and there's, again, many questions about where this is going and why.
Your thoughts, the secretive nature of this? I mean, you and I have some really good contacts from decades of covering the mob. This came out of nowhere. No one seemed to know about it, be hinting about it, anything at all. There was some stuff bubbling around on some of the podcasts about a cold case murder a few weeks before, but nobody was zeroing in on this one.
Yeah, I mean, two things. One, the motive for this hit, was it strictly a drug underworld kind of situation, or is there a mob component? That's part of the questions that sit out there now. The second question is, this was in 1999. And if you remember, there was a lot going on in 99. That's when the Tally started cooperating. Marino was indicted. Then the whole organization was indicted. The question that sits over all of this is, 26 years later, why is this a city case as opposed to a federal case? Where are the feds in all of this? Why if the feds were out, they handed it off to the DA's office? The feds not going to prosecute this, or is there more coming? I mean, like I said, until we start seeing some documentation, until a couple of years and we get a better idea, it's just a 26-year-old murder case and an arrest. And the names, I mean, we're familiar with the backstory, but where is it going? That's where things stand right now. We don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go back to 1999, that time period right there. Everybody was on the street from the Philadelphia mob at that time, pretty much, including Joe Legambi, who later became the boss. He had just gotten out of prison a couple of years before on an acquittal on a murder case. Everybody's on the street. There's, as you're talking about, a kind of a drug underworld battle going on in South Philly. There's home invasion robberies included in the area going on by different groups from what we were hearing at the time. There's discussions about street tax and things like that being imposed on drug dealers. And then one of the guys who was home invaded is Richard Leidy 2 months before. We'll get to a little more on that a little bit later, but all this activity is going on in the background. It's kind of like a WWE fight where everybody's in the ring at this time.
Exactly. I mean, if you remember the Ralph Mazzucca hit, that involved the home invasion. And again, what we're dealing with is this strictly something out of the drug underworld, or is there, you mentioned the street tax, is there a mob element to all of this? And we had heard all those rumors. We heard about a Boston connection when it happened. All of those things surfaced in 1999. Yet when the feds brought, and you got to remember, at this point, Ralph Natal is cooperating. When the feds bring that RICO case, they don't include this murder in that RICO case. They didn't include the Mazzucca hit either, but that's a whole nother dynamic with Roger Vela. And I don't know that, the Mazzucca case gets mentioned in the context of this, and are they going to resurrect that? My take on this is there's no way any prosecutor is going to use Roger Vela as a witness. And without Vela, I don't know where to go with Mazzucca. This is a whole different thing. We don't know who the players are. We don't know who's cooperating. We don't know where the information is coming from. And it keeps, you had mentioned the other day, maybe more sophisticated DNA testing resulted in evidence that they think they can use now. But I keep coming back to the question I posed earlier. Why the city rather than the feds?
Yeah. Also, George, let's talk about this. When something comes out of the blue like this on a case that's been sitting there for 26 years, and there were, for lack of a better term, more high-profile mob murders that they could have come to, not saying this is a mob murder. Again, it's drug-related at this point, so we know more. There is discussion about the mob in and around it, that Gino Marconi was connected with organized crime figures in terms of a possible street tax. Was he paying it? Was he not? That kind of thing. Having said that, kind of, does this tell you there's a cooperator or multiple cooperators, that this comes like out of the blue here? I mean, there was not a word on the street or anywhere else that this was going on, that people were being brought in and questioned. Out of nowhere comes this, and it comes through Philly homicide detectives, cold case detectives, to the DA's office, as you've pointed out, not the FBI and not a federal grand jury.
I had someone call me last week about this and said, listen, the way these things play out, somebody got jammed up in a whole nother situation and knew something about this and said, hey, let me try to get myself out from underneath this problem. That could be what's happened here. Somebody's come forward because they were jammed up in something totally different and was looking for a way out. That's one element. The other is, as I mentioned, more sophisticated DNA. Maybe they've come up with stuff. It keeps begging the question, why now? Why now? After 26 years, and is this, if it's simply a drug case and retribution for something going on in the drug underworld, then maybe it's a one-man band here, one-man show. If it's more than that, then is there a conspiracy to commit murder? Who else was involved, and where does it take them? And again, who does it take? Does it take the DA's office somewhere, or do the feds jump in at another point and take over?
Yeah. And you know Larry Krasner, like I know him in terms of his reputation. He's not taking a 26-year-old murder case if it's going to be an L or a loss. He wants winning cases. He's only going to take this if it meets his criteria. And his criteria goes like this: DNA, eyewitness, a videotape, phone records, DNA, some new DNA, fingerprints, blood types, that kind of thing. He's just, or a tape recording or a full confession from somebody.
Well, I mean,
some of those elements are in here probably.
Yeah, and that leads me back to what I was saying before. If there's enough evidence to make this case, and there was some mob component, I think the feds would have kept it, or taken it. If it's simply simply is the wrong word. If it's drug underworld related, and that's all it's going to be, makes a lot of sense for the DA to have it. We'll see.
Yeah. But I will say this, with all due respect to the district, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Philadelphia, there has not been a real zeal or hunger in the last 15 years to prosecute big mob cases. They did a 2020 case. I wouldn't call that a big mob case. They got some big names in there, but it wasn't the overarching RICO case that included murders, things like that. I don't know that they're moving at those kind of things now. But then this, if you're one of the older guys around Philadelphia, drug world, mob guys, whatever, and out of the blue like this comes a 26-year-old murder, things that you thought were in the rearview mirror going the other way now come back to your mind. You know what you did. You know what you may have been involved in. Does this now give you a couple of more sleepless nights that you thought were all gone? Because, hey, they just popped a 26-year-old murder here.
That's what Ronnie Previty always used to say. You know what you did. What you worry about is whether the feds know what you did or the DA knew what you did. And that's what this is coming back to. The other mob component in all of this is Marconi's father and Marconi's uncle were big in the Bruno organization way, way back, Mark and Funzi. So, there's that as well. So I think until we start seeing documents, all we're doing here is saying maybe this, maybe that. And that's where it's going to stay until this case moves forward. There's a hearing, September 15th? More information may surface then. We'll see.
Yeah. My information from poking around on this all week last week is that Mark Marconi, who was made, I believe, under Bruno and in the Scarfo era, was so close with Nicky Scarfo Sr. that Nicky Scarfo named one of his sons Mark after Mark Marconi. Funzi Marconi was also in the mob. I am told that during this time period, Gino Marconi, the victim here, was approached about a mob street tax, and both of those gentlemen counseled him not to do that and not to pay that, and said, we'll take care of it to him. That seems to say in the element here is the mob street tax. And let me just point out one thing. At the time of the murder, the day after, there were two news conferences, one with the head of organized crime, John Appledorn, the other with the captain of homicide, Jim Brady, at the time. They gave information that Mr. Marconi had ties to a mob figure, which I'm not going to get into right now, but we all know who we're talking about. They gave that information to us. We didn't create that information. It didn't come off the street, anything like that. They gave that to us. So I want to be clear about things that people bring up 26 years later. George and I don't sit around over a cup of coffee and invent scenarios. We are given information or told about information or in court documents or investigating on our own. That's where that information comes from.
Yeah, and the same thing with the rifle that was used. Did it come down from Boston? That's something else that we were hearing at the time. But again, we're 26 years later. The other thing about Mark and Funzi Marconi, and Phil Leonetti wrote about this in his book. I don't know if the relationship with Scarfo was as good as it could have been toward the end. I mean, according to Leonetti, Scarfo forced the Marconi brothers to set up and kill Dominic DeVito, Mickey Diamond, because Scarfo had always hated Mickey Diamond, and Mickey Diamond was aligned with those guys. And they had to do it. It was one of those do it or you're going to have your own kind of problem. So that, they come out of that era, which is a bizarre, we remember how the violent Scarfo era was. They come out of that. His bloodlines go back to that. His mob ties go back to that. But the other component is, and I think you've mentioned this, is he was seriously into the drug business. And the most amazing thing to me was that video of you interviewing Lighty after it happened. I mean, think about that. This is a guy, the victim of a home invasion, but this is a guy, if he in fact had committed that murder, is standing up in front of you in front of a camera and just portraying himself as a victim of an earlier crime. And if this allegation is correct, and he had committed a murder that same day, the day before, very, very staggering piece of journalism and an amazing part of the story if this plays out this way.
Crime scene tape, splattered blood, a ricochet mark on the front door. That's what's left from the ambush murder of 42-year-old Gino Marconi and the shooting of his 31-year-old girlfriend. Police are standing by for possible retaliation.
Well, I think you got to be concerned with the retaliation, certainly. When you have an open type, an incident like that, somebody's going to deliver a message back or they're going to lose face.
Investigators identified Marconi as an associate of mob boss Joey Merlino. Early theories are that he was gunned down by drug dealers, not the mob. A search of Marconi's house turned up guns, 4 pounds of marijuana, and bank records totaling more than $500,000. But police have no suspects.
Police simply have a very sketchy description of a perpetrator, a darker complected male with a chocolate-colored shirt running south on 20th Street. That's all we have at this point.
Sources say police found a rifle inside this van that was set on fire near the murder scene. Investigators believe the van was used to stalk Marconi. Investigators say this hit was carefully planned and well executed. It comes at a time when the FBI and local law enforcement are conducting several high-level drug investigations in the same neighborhood.
Get a gun to my chest, black eyes, forced down to the ground.
Richard Leidy lives a block from the murder scene. Home invaders busted into his house in February, looking for a safe full of money. They threatened to kill him. Investigators are trying to determine if these two incidents are connected.
I'm concerned about my family's safety and mine, sure.
For his part, Merlino denies any connection to Marconi or the murder. They blame me for everything, he said, even the war in Yugoslavia. In South Philadelphia, Dave Schratweiser, Fox News.
Well, George, let me give you the background on that just so everybody at home kind of knows how that happened. You know, because I've talked to you about it. At the time of the murder, there's news conferences going on the next day, the next morning, from Homicide and Organized Crime. They're talking about it. They're telling us about it. They mentioned federal drug investigations that were ongoing in South Philadelphia at the time. They also mentioned home invasion robberies of known drug dealers or drug kingpins or drug traffickers in that area. 2 months prior to that, in February of 1999, there was a home invasion robbery at Richard Leidy's home. Yeah. I was trying to go cover that. I went and covered it. The feds were there. city people were there, all that kind of thing. I tried to interview him then. He would not talk to us. We had an expletive deleted conversation about that. It didn't happen. After the murder, and they're talking about home invasion robberies, I'm like, that guy lives right around the corner, 2 blocks away. I decided to drive over there with my cameraman at the time, Brad now, and we went over, and Lighty was coming out of the house. So I stepped to him to talk to him, and I talked to him. What's amazing to me now is, as you just said, if he in fact is the killer, that's 12 hours after the murder.
Yeah.
Would you go on television with me on Fox, on camera, and talk about your home invasion? He was a home invasion victim at the time. Would you go on television and do that? What if someone saw you leaving the murder scene and said, hey, that guy on Fox, that's the guy who did the shooting yesterday. I saw him running from the scene. That's the chance you take doing that.
No, it's a ballsy move, but the argument you just made is something a defense attorney might make in front of a jury if this case gets to that point. Why would my guy talk publicly 12 hours after the murder on camera? So yeah, I mean, there's so many different components to this thing, and it's fascinating that it's come back 26 years later. And as I said, until we start seeing more documents or learn about witnesses, all of this is speculation.
Yeah. Let's talk about Gino Marconi for the folks at home who may not even know who Gino Marconi is. Gino Marconi, in addition to his family bloodline here we talked about, at the time, George, according to people I know investigating this, and I know you heard this when we were writing about it back in the day, Gino was a lot bigger than you think he was. Investigators found some amount of drugs, money, cash, guns in his house. They found a file cabinet with the deeds to 35 plus properties that he had with another family member that they were renting out around the city. He had $500,000 in cash in different bank accounts, according to law enforcement people I spoke with, and a lot of cash laying around or being moved around at the time. And I am told by some folks that he was concerned at the time that something might happen to him. In case people don't know this, he was involved in a kind of drug feud with Richard Leidy at the time. Richard Leidy lived 2 blocks away. He was a drug guy too. Marconi's a drug guy. This could be just about that. And we'll find out because everything is sealed now. We can't see documents. We can't see probable cause, evidence, witnesses, who a potential cooperator here is. But those two things kind of stand out. These were not small-time drug dealers here. They were pretty strong South Philadelphia alleged drug dealers.
Yeah, I mean, and this goes back to that old, make money, not headlines. Don't call attention to yourself. This guy was operating for a long time, making an awful lot of money. The other name that surfaced, somebody else called me the other day, Lighty, is that what we say? Lighty supposedly was close to Billy Raddick. I mean, that's another name from the drug underworld of that particular era. So you've got a lot of different players and names, and I think if this turns out to be, and I don't want to use simply a drug case. If this is a drug case, it opens a window into how lucrative these businesses were, how much money people were really making, and what was at stake that could lead to somebody killing somebody else.
Yeah. George, this was so secretive, I'm being told, in the last couple of weeks before they announced this last Monday, that this was not done in the usual fashion in terms of electronic transferring of information and documents to the DA's office. I'm told this was hand carried to the DA's office and reviewed by the DA's office and then approved. That's how concerned they were about some of this leaking out, potentially what new evidence they had, what witnesses they have. Is there a potential new cooperator here? And furthering that is, I'm now being told this is going to be in a grand jury, and there's 2 kinds of grand juries in Philadelphia: an investigating grand jury, where you don't have to have a probable cause hearing. You do at some point, but not at the beginning. And there is an indicting grand jury. You can call witnesses there. If those witnesses refuse to testify, they can be compelled to testify. They can bring charges. They can add people to it. And on top of it, interestingly enough, if they are to take you to trial from a case that comes out of one of those indicting grand juries, according to lawyers, I'm not a lawyer, they don't have to disclose discovery until 60 days before trial, again, to protect evidence and witnesses and potential cooperators. That's kind of what's going on here, which tells me, as you've already said several times, this is going somewhere else in addition to Richard Leidy and the Gino Marconi hit.
Yeah, I mean, it may be that authorities hope it goes in somewhere else. Again, it remains to be seen. We've been down this road many times with unsolved murders and where are they and what's going to happen. But there are so many different elements here that it's a fascinating story. It's almost a look back in time. You know, we go back to 1999 and what was going on the streets of South Philadelphia. It was a different time than it is today. And the other interesting thing is what you said a little bit earlier. You know, guys thought this was all in the rearview mirror. Forget about it. It's done. The statute of limitations never runs on a murder. It's always there.
Yeah. If you were sleeping easy, you might not be sleeping as easy in the past 7 days since this got announced. George, let's walk back through a couple of quick things here just to kind of bring this all together. We talked about the drug underworld. We talked about drugs in the mob. We talked about mob hits that have a kind of a drug thread running through them. You talked about Ralph Mazzucca. We talked about a couple of others in this particular situation. Gino Marconi, obviously this one. We had Maniscalco, the Maniscalco hit. We had the Johnny Gons hit.
Right.
There was some drug element supposedly involved there. Drug money found in the house after the murder. Those kind of things. So we do have mob related, according to the authorities, not made up by George Anastasia or Dave Schratweiser. That's what they said at the time. We do have mob hits that do have a drug element in them or a thread kind of running through them.
Yeah, and it's the question is, the fundamental question is, why now? I mean, that's and you cut through all of everything else we're talking about today. The question that sits there is, why now? What did investigators find? What did they bring forward that gave the DA confidence to say, "Oh, let's make the case"? And then the corollary to that, in my mind anyway, is where were the feds in all of this? Mm-hmm. It's very unusual for the feds, you know, they're the 500-pound gorilla, to say to the DA's office, "Here, you can have this, go run with it, and we'll help you to do that." I mean, the one time that happened in the Scarfo era is when they carved out that Frankie Flowers hit, gave it to the DA, and that was a botched deal. And guys, you know, it's inside baseball, but the whole reason Joe Legambi was back out on the streets was because of that. So yeah, it's when you're looking internally about the way things operate and why, who takes the case, who makes the case, who builds the case, who prosecutes the case. In the back of my mind, I keep saying to myself, if there was a strong mob element in this, we'd see the feds. And you mentioned this earlier. I don't think the DA or the feds want to come with a case that they're going to lose. Yeah. So if the feds come, they're going to come. They've been embarrassed by the last couple mob cases, even though there were partial victories. And enough's enough.
George, harken back with me to the 80s and the early 90s. And was it or was it not a tool or technique, if you would, by federal prosecutors that they would let the city prosecute and try some of those homicides, and win or lose, that doesn't mean the game is over. That they can still take even a losing battle in a courtroom at the city level. They can take a murder like that and use it as a predicate act in a federal racketeering indictment. And you mentioned before that murders, there is no statute of limitations on it. RICO cases can go back really far too, and you can throw murders into it. What's your thoughts there?
You can fold it into a RICO if you've got, again, you've got to be some basis for it. You got to have some evidence. You know, I don't know. I mean, this is one. We mentioned Mazzucca, we mentioned Maniscalco, Johnny Gongs, DiPietro even. I mean, there are murders sitting out there that could be part of a broader racketeering conspiracy. But how do you put it all together? What are the elements out there now that might make that possible? Do they exist? Or is this a foray into that area to see if they can stir the pot and maybe take another step, get somebody to come forward? Are you going to use this case to pressure somebody? Are you going to use this case to influence somebody? Are you going to use this case to build something bigger? Or is this in and of itself a murder case?
That's one and done.
Yeah.
George, talk about that a little bit. Cooperators, that's a tricky business, getting people to cooperate. Maybe there's an ongoing drug case right now that somebody popped up in, and, you know, they stepped to him and told him, we have you buried for a 15 to 30-year sentence. And they said, time out. I have something I think would be of value to you. Maybe one case, maybe two, maybe three, maybe gives them another potential cooperator. Maybe they cooperate. Maybe gives them a piece of evidence, which I am told there is at least one piece of physical evidence here that corroborates someone who has given them information in this case. And I'm talking about the feds. I believe 90% of the investigating here took place by the FBI, not city homicide detectives. They are connected with the feds through the cold case squad. They have people who sit over at the federal building, go back and forth to police headquarters, and work in tandem with them here. But I am told this was the bulk of this, the majority of this was the feds coming to the city guys. And it could be an ongoing drug case, could be another murder case where somebody just decided, I'm giving up something better than me, and I want a pass or a reduced sentence, but I'll tell you this. Correct?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I had a call this week from a friend who said that's probably what's going on. But again, the point you're making it leads to my question. Why would the feds hand it off? They don't like the case? It's not strong enough? Or what's the strategy here? And maybe there is a strategy. Maybe it's part of, we're going to build, we're not going to rush. We're not going to come till we got all the T's crossed and the I's dotted.
Yeah, could be. And just so we repeat again, everybody keeps asking me, why is this happening? Why is that happening? What's this? What's that? The case is sealed. That means we can't see any probable cause affidavit. We can't even see the full contents of a warrant here to know what it is they had. George, I don't want to get away from this without talking about the careful planning nature of this Gino Marconi hit. There's drug feuding going on, rival drug dealers kind of thing going on. The van, in this case, we'll show you a picture of it here, all burned out after the hit. That van was parked on Gino Marconi's block several days before, further down the block. And it was almost meticulously, you know how parking is in South Philadelphia, moved up the block 1, 2, possibly 3 times until it was right there. That's in front of Gino Marconi's house. If you look at the roof of that van, there was a turret cut in the top of that. The gunman stood up in the back of that with a .22 caliber rifle, opened fire, shot and killed Gino Marconi, seriously and critically wounded his fiancee girlfriend at the time. She managed to recover, still has injuries to this day she's dealing with. By the way, Gino Marconi left behind 3 daughters and a son. Just want to point that out here. In addition, the weapon was dropped inside the van, shell casings inside the van and outside the van on the street, and set on fire. That is Gangland style, mob hit type style doing it. Or is somebody trying to make it look like that?
Well, if it's a one-man operation, it's almost staggering to think about that one person planned this and laid it out that way and quietly and patiently waited till he had his shot. If that's what we have right now, one man. And
he got away too, George, for 26 years.
Right now. Yeah, he walked away from it after setting the van on fire. That begs several questions, and the supposition is there were other people involved. That's where we are, and that's, some of the stuff you look at, you say it doesn't. 2 and 2 don't make 4 in this case. He did all this himself.
Yeah. I'm not good at math, but I'm a little better at math than that sounds to me. And George, you talked about DNA before. Shell casings in the van, the rifle, just so everybody knows, the wooden stock on it and handle on it were burned up in the fire. I believe there was a magazine in there, whether there were unfired rounds in there that may have been loaded by the gunman and left some DNA or fingerprints on. They didn't get fingerprints at the time. DNA testing in 1999 was relatively new and certainly not as sophisticated and detailed as it is now. I mean, they can get a DNA sample from the inside of rubber gloves by turning them inside out and taking it from the fingertips. I mean, that's how good DNA is here. And it could have been a DNA break. They put everything back in the DNA cauldron down at Quantico, the FBI or the Philly Homicide unit put it in their crime scene lab. And it could be DNA that, brings this home.
Yeah, I mean, that might be what precipitated all of this. And they've got Lighty nailed here. That's what they think. And the question is, did he do all of that on his own? That's where we are.
Yeah. All right, George. So the next date in this case is September 15th. That's when the preliminary hearing is scheduled. From my years covering the courts, and I know yours, those things usually don't happen the first time. Do you expect that to happen? Do you expect it to be put off? The fact that there's an indicting grand jury potentially looking at this, your thoughts about whether that hearing really happens?
Yeah, probably it won't. And sometimes, even if it doesn't mean we're going to get very much information out of preliminary. I mean, even if it happens. There's other things to watch. Right now, he's represented by a public defender. Does that change? All different elements. And again, we're at the very, very beginning of what could be a long, drawn-out saga.
Right. And point out here that Richard Leidy is being held on no bail in Kern-Fromholtz, which is a city state-run prison. That's him right there. Right. And like I said, I think right now, my opinion is everything is on the table till it's not. It's the process of elimination stuff that homicide detectives, even on TV, talk about, where everybody's a potential suspect until they're not. So kind of, I think, until they start tossing things out and we see that on paper and we know precisely what they have, everybody I kind of have talked to here said, keep an eye on this case. Everything's on the table. Don't jump to conclusions. It could just be Richard Leidy charged, accused, and potentially found guilty in the Gino Marconi murder, and that's all it is. My years in the business tell me that's not the case here.
Well, I mean, and again, the other thing to watch is as the pressure builds, as Leidy looks at what they have the case against them, what does he decide to do?
Right.
Is there anything he can offer to get out from underneath his own problem? Don't know, but that's all things to watch.
All right, George, it's always fun spending time with you right after Labor Day here. Summer is over. You're going back to school this week to teach. Right. We figured we'd squeeze this in, and we did.
It's a step back in time. This is a fascinating story.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. We'll be keeping an eye on it, George, myself, and others. Thanks, everybody, for joining us on the Philly Prime Podcast and Mob Talk Sit Down, and we'll see you next time. Be safe.
All right.